Welcome back to the daily Rambam class. It is Thursday, so before we look at today's chapter, chapter 9 of Kilayim, of mixed species or species, let's first see where we are up to in the Rambam in general. The Rambam wrote many books. The book of the Rambam that we are learning, which is it's the largest work by far and perhaps most comprehensive, is the Mishnah Torah. He called it Mishnah Torah. As we've learned, Mishnah comes from the word sheni, which means second. And he called it second to the Torah because the Rambam writes in his introduction that as long as you've read the 5 books of the Chumash, then you can move straight to the Rambam and know everything you need to know in order to do what you need to do as a Jew. The Rambam's work, Mishnah Torah, contains 14 volumes, 14 Sfarim, 14 books. And there are these 14 volumes. Baruch Hashem, we've concluded the book of Mada, of knowledge, where we spoke about things like belief in God. And we continued with Sefer Abba, which included mitzvahs that bring out our love for Hashem, like making brachas and having a bris. We continued with the book of Zmanim, Sefer Zmanim, which had all of the halachas relating to the different times of the year, from Shabbos to Rosh Chodesh, which is coming up this Shabbos, to Rosh Hashanah, to Tisha B'Av. Then we continued with Sefer Nashim, the book that deals with laws relating to men and women, such as marriage and divorce. We continued with Sefer Kedusha, holiness, and it discussed 2 areas which makes the Jewish nation holy, and that is that we are elevated in our relationships and in our food. So the book of Kedusha speaks about those 2 topics. It speaks about forbidden relationships and forbidden foods, as well as the laws of shchita, of slaughtering. And most recently, we concluded the 6th volume of the Rambam, Sefer Hafla'ah, which is the book of promises. And we are now on to book number 7, which means that we are in number of books almost halfway through the entire Rambam, which covers every single topic that exists in Jewish law. So that, please God, at the rate that you're going, if you keep going strong, and the Hashem should give you the strength to be able to do so, by the end of this, you will be great Torah sages, which the whole Jewish community can turn to for insight and wisdom. But for today, let us... Okay, so this is broken down in a different way. These are the 14 volumes. The total is 1,000 chapters exactly. The total is exactly 83 subjects. So if you do the maths, you'll see exactly how far through we are. That we are now up to the book of seeds. And we started by mixed seeds. This book has 85 chapters, which means it will take approximately 3 months to cover. So stay strong as we work through all the different agricultural laws. 7 subjects, and the first of these subjects is Kilayim. Okay, I don't have them here just yet. Now let's take a look at today's chapter, chapter 8. Okay. So today we move on to a much larger topic, physically speaking, than just seeds, and that is mixed breeding. We're going to discuss both mixed breeding and whether one is allowed to use different animals together as a team in the workspace, in the field. I mean, today with modern technology where we have machinery and tractors, so perhaps this could be avoided altogether. But back in the day, before the invention of the engine, where a human being was alone, not strong enough to plow his fields, so he would make use of the strength of an ox with a yoke in order to help him plow his fields. Before we move into the text, I'll just share a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, a very powerful one. But before I get to that, yes, David.
You said we're starting with chapter 8. This one
9.
says chapter 9. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. That was my mistake. Today is chapter 9. Before we move into the chapter, I'll just share an anecdote, a teaching from the Baal Shem Tov, a very powerful teaching, Hasidic teaching. And the teaching says like this: if you see a ox running towards you, you're in the Kruger National Park. This isn't part of his teaching, but I'm expanding on it. And you're going for a hike, and the next thing you know, a buffalo starts running your way. What do? What do you say?
Climb a tree.
Climb a tree. Okay, good. Any other suggestions?
Stand still.
Stand still. Okay, what if it wasn't a buffalo? What if it was an elephant?
You can't run.
What?
Stand still.
Stand still. Okay. So these are very practical tips. But in general, the approaches would be, usually the approaches one would hear are one of two approaches. Either you escape or you kill it. If you're able to escape, then escape. If you're not able to escape, it's endangering you. So you've got to save your life. You've got to kill it. The Baal Shem Tov says, when you see an ox goring at you, that refers to your very own animal within yourself. Sometimes we have a wilde chaya, a wild animal within us. And he is goring at us. He's trying to make real tsaris. He's trying to make real trouble. We're trying to be good yidlach, good Jews, serving the Eibishter, connecting to Hashem, bringing Hashem into the world. But then we have this wilde chaya, this wild animal inside of us. I mean, I'm not talking about you. You're all from the most righteous amongst us. I'll just talk about myself. And I see the ox. I see my own animal, and he is ferocious. What do? So one solution would be to run away, meaning to try to disconnect myself from any worldly matters. Try to live a spiritual life. Another approach would be to kill it. There were many that took the approach of self-affliction, where they would sleep on nails and roll in the snow and do all types of self-effacing behavior in order to break and kill the animal drives within them. Comes the Baal Shem Tov and he says both of these approaches are wrong. What you've got to do is you've got to harness the ox. Because when you do, then you will be able to produce much more on your farm than you would have been able to do without it. So you were plowing the farm yourself, and it was tough, but you were going along, and then an animal came your way, and what you didn't realize is that animal, although it looks like it's threatening you, if only you can harness him, he will be able to help you achieve so much more. So Hasidus explains that we've got to strive to talk to our animal, to our wilde chaya, that he too get excited about Hashem, about mitzvahs. And if we can take that wildkeit, that wildness, that animalism within us, and direct it towards good things, then we could achieve much more than we'd be able to achieve in our own simple, pure human self. So spiritually speaking, the concept of harnessing an animal, although physically nowadays it may be cruel since we have other mediums of doing so, I'm not sure, but spiritually what it represents is that when we feel that we have an animal within us that is getting in the way of our service of Hashem, we've got to realize that we've got to work on getting him on board, because when he is on board, we're able to plow our way through the fields and produce so much more than we'd be able to produce without it. With that long introduction, now let's take a look at today's Rambam. The Rambam begins, when a person causes a male to enter into relations with a female of a different species, whether a domesticated animal, a wild animal, a chicken or fowl, a bird, or even different types of sea animals, he is liable for lashes. He gets malchus by Torah law. As the Torah says, this applies both in Israel and outside of Israel. As the Torah says, you shall not mate your animals with another species. It's a clear mitzvah. One of the 613 mitzvahs is that one is prohibited, forbidden to mix breed. This applies whether the animal, beast, or fowl belongs to yourself or it belongs to a colleague. So if a guy says, okay, I'm not going to do it because it's mine, but will you do it for me? Can't do that either. However, you wouldn't get lashes unless you actually insert the animal's organs into each other. If not, meaning you need to do an act, if you merely placed one on top of the other or verbally encouraged them to mate, then that is forbidden by the sages, and one would receive stripes of rebellion for rebelling against the words of the sages. So again, one of the 613 mitzvahs is that one is forbidden to mix breeds. However, biblically speaking, this is only if a person actually physically put the organs in position. If a person just brought the two animals together, then that would be forbidden by the sages. However, if you're not even doing that, if you're just placing two species of animals in one corral and you see them mating, then you don't need to stop them. So you're not allowed to make it happen, but you don't need to stop it from happening either. Here's another important one. A Jew is forbidden to give his animal to a non-Jew to have him mated with a forbidden species. You might say, this mitzvah only applies to Jews. Non-Jews are allowed to mix breed. So let me give my animal to a non-Jewish vet and let him do the mixed breed. That's not allowed either. If a person did what he wasn't allowed to do, he transgressed, and he mated his animal with a mixed species, then he is allowed to benefit from the offspring. So this is an interesting one. Although the Torah prohibits the act, the offsprings are allowed. If the mated species were both kosher, you can eat the offspring, as we learned in the laws of kashrus, of forbidden foods. Okay. Now, although two types of animals or beasts resemble each other, and one can impregnate the other, meaning they can become pregnant from each other, since there are two species, they are considered as mixed species, and it is forbidden to mate them. So even if they look super similar, if they're two species, that's a problem. What are examples of this? A wolf and a dog, a hunting dog and a fox. I once came across a YouTube video of somebody that bought themselves a pet on the black market. They bought themselves a little cute dog, and when the dog got a little bit older, they took it to the vet. The vet told them, you don't have a dog, you have a fox. The person obviously had captured some baby foxes and sold it on the black market. So these things could get a little confusing, apparently. So if you have a hunting dog and a fox, a deer and a goat, it seem pretty different to me, but I guess there are different types of goats and different types of deers. Mountain goats and sheep, I guess not the regular goats. Horses and mules, mules and donkeys, donkeys and wild asses. Although they resemble each other, they are considered as mixed species, and so one would be liable if one was to mix breed them. Okay, here's an interesting one. When a species has both a wild species and a domesticated species, you have a wild ox and an ox, or a wild horse and a horse. I was thinking maybe a buffalo and a cow, but I think they're very different. I mean, they look similar, but they're very different. Anyhow, if they're the same species, but just one's wild and one's tame, then it is permitted to mate them together because they are still considered one species. However, a duck and a wild duck are considered as mixed species. Why is that? Because you can tell they're different by the fact that a domesticated duck has its testicles inside its body, while a wild duck has its testicles outside its body. This tells us that they are clearly two different species. Here's a koi. I don't know if I'm sure we've come across koi before. Koi is an interesting one. Koi is an animal where we're actually not sure if it's a wild animal or it's a domesticated animal. We're not sure under which classification it fits. And there is halachic relevance for this because the Torah prohibits eating the fat of a domesticated animal, but not of a wild animal, unless I mixed it up. Either way, a koi is an animal where we're not sure what it is. So whether you mix breed it with a beast, a wild animal, or a domesticated animal, this is considered forbidden. However, you wouldn't receive lashes because after all, we're in doubt of which one it is. What about the children of mixed breeding? Okay, we have a lot of that today. Offspring from mixed species whose mothers are from the same species may be mated. Okay, hold on over here. This is it's not so simple, but it's once you hold on, it's quite simple. So if the mothers of both offspring are from two different species, then you cannot mate them. I mean, I'm not a big, I've never had a dog. I don't know dogs, but I know a lot of dogs are mixed breeds. So if you have two dogs and they're the same, they're both mixed breeds from the same two breeds, but the one dog's father was of one species while the other dog's mother, but the two mothers were not of the same species, then it is forbidden to mate them. And one who does so receives lashes. Similarly, if one mated the offspring of such a union with an animal or any other species, even of its mother species, he is liable for lashes. So, for example, if, I don't know, okay, he'll give examples over here. What is implied? If you have a male mule whose mother is a donkey, so he can be mated with a female mule whose mother was also a donkey. However, it is forbidden to mate this male mule with an animal of any other species, even a donkey. It is I don't know why it says it is, however, because it's both forbidden. It is, however, forbidden to mate a male mule whose mother is a horse, I see why, with a female mule whose mother is a donkey. So they're both mules. They were both born from donkeys and horses. But since the one mule's mother was a donkey and the other mule's mother was a horse, so they cannot be mixed breeded. Similar laws apply in all analogous situations. Yes, David?
I might be wrong, but I thought a mule was unable to breed. With I don't know if it's male or female. Just an idea that I had from way back.
I have heard of such a concept. I cannot confirm either way. I don't know if anybody else knows. But even if they wouldn't be able to have offspring, I guess why would somebody do it? But in theory, even if they don't produce offspring, they possibly still can come together, which would be forbidden. But why would somebody do that if there's no offspring? I don't know. It's a good question. Maybe you could get back to us. Share, do some research, please, David, and share it on tomorrow's group, if you can. Giving you some homework. Therefore, a person who wants to mate a male and female mule or to have a carriage drawn by two mules, listen to this, it's quite interesting. You should check their identifying signs. You should check their ears, their tails, and their voices. If they resemble each other, then it is clear that their mother is from the same species and the above activities are permitted. So those are the signs. ears, tails, and voices. That will tell you who their mother was. Okay. The first 6 halachos discussed mating. Now we're going to discuss not mating, but causing 2 different animals to be paired in doing work. So not being paired in mating, but to be paired in doing work. Anyone who, and that's another one of the 630 mitzvahs, which is a negative mitzvah, something one is not allowed to do. Anyone who performs labor with 2 species of animals or wild beasts together, when one of them is kosher and the other is not, receives lashes. It's liable for lashes. This applies in and out of Israel. As the Torah says, do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Whether one plows, seeds, has them pull a wagon or a stone, or led them together even with his voice alone, he is liable for lashes. This is derived from the term together. In any way, if, however, one merely yokes them to a wagon, he is exempt unless he pulls them or leads them. So if you put them into position, but they actually didn't cause them to move, he's not liable. But the moment they start pulling that wagon, if they're of 2 different species, one kosher, one not, then he has violated one of the 613 mitzvahs. Now, biblically speaking, this violation is only mixing a kosher and non-kosher animal, but the rabbis extend it to any 2 species. The prohibition involves not only an ox and a donkey, but also all other different species, where one is non-kosher, the other kosher, whether a domesticated animal with another domesticated animal like a pig and a lamb, or a beast with a beast like a wild deer and an elephant. I don't know how he'd get those 2 together. Or a beast with a domesticated animal like a dog and a goat, or a deer with a pig or the like. For all of the above types of combinations, one is liable for lashes according to scriptural law, for a beast is considered as an animal, as we explained elsewhere. So although the Torah uses the word animal and not beast, animal can refer to both domesticated and wild animals, as it is in English. According to rabbinic law, however, whenever it is forbidden to mate 2 species, it is also forbidden to plow with them together, to pull them or to lead them. If one performs labor with 2 such species together, pull them or lead them, he is liable for stripes of rebellion, of rebellious conduct. It is forbidden to lead an animal from dry land. Here's an interesting one. Okay, I'd love to see how you'd figure this one out. Maybe as technology advances. But it is forbidden to lead an animal from dry lands together with a sea animal, like a goat with a large fish. If I did so, he is exempt. So I don't know, maybe you have some kind of boats that's going in shallow waters, and you've got, I don't know, your dolphin pulling underneath, and you've got your camel pulling on top. I don't know how you pulled it off, but either way, it is forbidden. Okay, that was an interesting one. If you have a wagon that is being drawn by mixed species, one who sits in the wagon also gets lashes. Why? Even though he didn't actually lead them, he is liable because sitting there causes the animal to pull the wagon. The fact that he's sitting there already makes them move forward, and so he is liable for causing 2 different animals to work together. Similarly, if one person was sitting in a wagon and another person was leading their animals, they both get lashes. Even 100 people who lead a team of mixed species are liable for lashes. The Torah takes this sud very seriously. And the final 2 halachos, number 10, it is permitted to perform a task with a human and an animal together, or with a beast, a person and a beast. For example, a person can plow with an ox, or pull a wagon with a donkey, or the like. Now, we're not saying we can force a person to do that. We're saying if you want to be that person, then that's allowed. At least that's what I assume. This is derived from the phrase an ox and a donkey together, i.e. not a man and a donkey and not a man and an ox. So we mean 2 animals, but a person and an animal would be allowed. So I guess practically speaking, if the farmer back in the day before motors were invented figured out a way where he and his ox together pulled that plow forward, then that would be allowed. When an animal has been sanctified, here's an interesting one. So a person said that I'm dedicating this animal to the Beis Hamikdash, but the animal was disqualified. And then it was redeemed. So even though it is one animal, the Torah considers it as if it's two animals in one. It's a two in one, as if it's two bodies. On the one hand, it's consecrated because he dedicated it to the base of Mikdash. And on the other hand, it's considered like a normal animal because it was redeemed, because it was disqualified. Thus, this animal is like a non-kosher animal and a kosher animal mixed together. And the Torah says, if any impure that may not be offered as a sacrifice, according to the oral tradition, this verse was interpreted as referring to animals that had been sanctified but disqualified. So there we see it's considered like a non-kosher. Accordingly, a person who plows with an ox that has been sanctified but disqualified or mates such an ox gets lashes. Because of the prohibition against mixed species, this prohibition is part of the received tradition. So this is a unique law which we have oral tradition of. That brings us to the end of chapter 9 of the laws of mixed